I've been waiting for this. Oh boy, I've been waiting for this. What's up?
What's up, Dad Bod Nation? Dad Bod Steve here with our first ever full-length podcast. We're excited to have a guest today. He is a former drug addict who is now turned therapist, and he has an amazing story. You're not going to want to miss this one. So we want to welcome Kyle Hickman to the show. Kyle, thanks for joining us, man.
Thank you for having me, man.
Oh, I know. It's been a while. We've been planning this for a bit, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
Awesome. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell the crowd about yourself and where you're from and the beginning of your life and everything.
Okay. So, like you said, my name is Kyle Hickman. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I originally grew up in Oklahoma. Lived there from 1983 when I was born until about 1995 and moved to Cache Valley. And ended up moving here because my dad had passed away and we had family that was up here, and my mom wanted us to be closer to that side of the family. I graduated from Skyview High School up here in 2001. Attended college at Utah State University, did my master's there too. I don't know. What else do you want to know?
No, that's awesome, man. I didn't know you were from Oklahoma. That's cool. And so I'm sorry to hear about your dad passing so long ago, but it's cool that you guys came to be close to family and everything. So let's kind of shift over into your story now. We're going to talk about some sensitive things in your life that you've been extremely vulnerable about opening up and sharing on social media. And so let's talk about it right away. Your first experience going and experiencing drugs, and then how it made you feel, what got you into it, what was the whole story behind that?
So I guess I was thinking about this question too, like my first actual experience encountering drugs outside of nicotine. I think I was about 15 in ninth grade. I was hanging out at a friend's house. His parents were drinking a little bit and brought up some kind of wine cooler type stuff, but nothing crazy happened at that point. It wasn't until I was a sophomore in high school. Actually, it was probably the summer between my sophomore and junior year. Started hanging out with a group of kids, and I think I drank alcohol for the first time, and then after that, within like 2 weeks, I was smoking weed. But that first time, it was a great feeling, you know. Like I gotta let loose a little bit. First time I smoked weed, nothing happened with that one. That was the second time that really hit me. And I think that was kind of like my vice for a little bit was weed more than alcohol. It was a lot more accessible, and I don't know, it just kind of made it so I didn't have to feel.
So it made you so you didn't have to feel. So was it when you go back to it and say, hey, here's why I did it, was it peer pressure? Was there something going on in life that you were trying to kind of avoid, or was it something that you just said, hey, I just want to try this and experience it for myself?
Yeah, no, nothing peer pressure wise. Like looking back on it, I don't know if I would have recognized this then, but looking back on it now, a lot of mine had to do with trauma. You know, like my dad, like I said, my dad passed away when I was about 12 years old. And I had like 4 years of deaths right after that. Like my dad passed, my grandma passed, my dad's best friend passed, my cousin committed, I guess, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, unalived herself, due to her own mental health and substance use. So it was trauma after trauma after trauma. And then not only that, like the experience of moving from Oklahoma to Utah, and we moved in the middle of winter too. So that was kind of a shift in culture and definitely a culture shock. So going from a place where, like, I grew up LDS, my twin brother and I were the only LDS people in our school, predominantly Native American, African American. So it was just a huge culture shock coming here. So that I define trauma as like a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. And that to me was also deeply distressing and disturbing. So having that, I just kind of feel like I didn't fit in. and I always felt like I didn't fit in. I was bullied a little bit in middle school. So nothing really about peer pressure, just more of like experimental, that just, I felt like I could fit in with this group of people, and it just so happened that that's what they were doing. And the rest was history from there.
Yeah, and we've had these conversations before, as we discussed doing this podcast together. I work at a school with incarcerated youth, right? And one of the group homes that comes to our school are drug addicts. And it's a lot of the same story. They went through something, or they had an experience with family, something happened to them, and it was the same thing. It was an escape. And so it's a really common thing. Do you see that a lot? And I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but do you see that a lot with your therapy as you help people with the same kind of struggles that you went through?
Yeah. Everybody has obviously their own individual story, and there's other factors that play into addiction itself. But the most common one that I think I see, and then I'm also a firm believer in this is the trauma. Trauma is the gateway to addiction. So we're always trying to hide, we're trying to escape, we're trying to avoid whatever it is. And it's this outlet, this negative coping skill is what it is that helps us avoid from having to deal with it or having to feel it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it changes your mindset too, right? Yeah, and it makes it bearable. And that's why a lot of people turn to these substances, whether it's legal or illegal. Definitely, it's something that is common with a lot of people. So let's go into, you started doing alcohol, you started smoking weed, and then as you saw it kind of snowball, what were the ripple effects that you saw with life, with family? How did it started affecting you from then on?
So it's kind of a progressive thing for sure. I didn't, like, going into my junior year, I had a 3.2 GPA. Like, I was an okay student. Looking back on it, like now, like I struggled with ADHD. So it was kind of hard for me to focus in school and stuff. But going into my junior year and throughout my junior year, my GPA dropped to like a 1.6. I really started disconnecting and connecting with this group of people and disconnecting from the authentic, real relationships that I had in my life, like my family, like my good friends that I didn't think that I really fit in with. And I just stopped going to school, kind of stopped caring. Like, my life was smoking weed and drinking, and that was pretty much it. So, I mean, that carried over. There was a period, I think after my first trimester in high school, or in my senior year, I realized, like, oh my gosh, I sat down with my counselor and I realized, like, I might not graduate. And that was a huge motivating factor in my life to start separating myself from that group, because that's something that I really wanted to do. And so I buckled down in the last 2 trimesters of school. I barely graduated. I had to take extra classes after school just in order to make up some credits. And ended up with like a 3.6 GPA the last 2 trimesters. And it was pretty interesting, but separating from that group, and I'm a firm believer, like, people, places, and things can either make or break something, like make or break our lives. So separating from those people had more of a positive impact in my life. And I started to, my twin brother and I moved to Arizona to get away from that and to prepare for an LDS mission. Even though I wasn't fully, like, I wasn't really bought into the whole mission thing. Yeah, I was kind of messing around a little bit down there still, and ended up moving back here to Cache Valley. And in fact, actually, after we graduated, within probably like 6 months, I think, the kids that we were hanging out with, I think most of them were actually in prison. They had kind of really got into meth pretty hard. So I look back and I'm like, holy crap! Like, if I wouldn't have taken it serious at that point, like, where would I be right now? I came close to going to prison, but I would have been right there with them. Like, it's just crazy how progressive it gets. Slow. Yeah,
a lot of the kids I went to school with, I was considered the good kid, even though some other people might tell you different. But I had a lot of friends, same thing. They went through prison, they went through that time, rehab and everything. And so I can see that definitely as you come back to life and you see who separated it and who didn't, who actually moved on with life, right, and who just kept on that same path. So you guys moved to Arizona and you came back. How did continuing drugs affect work? How did it do with family life? Like, how did your life continue to go after that?
Again, that was kind of a progressive thing too, as far as like, so I'll kind of go back a little bit to the whole mission thing. I ended up getting a mission call to go back down to Arizona. Go figure. I don't know why, but, and about
so it happens, right?
Yeah. A couple months before I was supposed to leave to go on that mission, a group of friends and I, there was 5 of us total. We ended up playing a prank that went really bad on our high school. The night before our homecoming, we ended up breaking into our school and spray painting it the rival colors and spray painting some sayings and stuff like that on the student center that was there. And it just so happens that as we were leaving, well, a couple of the kids ended up wanting to take some stuff from the concession stand. And long story short, we ended up getting out with some stuff and the cops pulled us over, searched the car and found some gloves that belonged to one of my friend. And the cop searched the car and my friend told him that that the stuff that we had taken was to supply his dad's business, which his dad owned a business. Real. Not that, but yeah. So we ended up breaking back into the school and cleaning it up. But the cop told us, like, if I find out anything happens tonight, I'm coming straight for you guys. Well, there was paint chips that were left behind from the spray paint, and they kept the gloves and matched that together. So we ended up getting a 3rd-degree felony and 2 Class A misdemeanors. And so they took my LDS mission away. And that actually, it's just crazy how everything just like follows right after that. That happened. I was supposed to leave in November of 2002, I believe.
Okay.
A long time ago. We'll just leave it at that. I'm old.
Hey, I'm older than you. It's okay.
Come January, they actually dropped all the charges. December, January, they dropped all the charges. In April of 2003, I actually got in a car accident. If you actually, I don't know if you can, but you can see there's a scar that is on my face. And that car accident is actually what led into my like deep addiction. I had 156 stitches in my face, and it wrecked me pretty good. Bruised my sciatic nerve, and that actually led me into getting a prescription for painkillers. And it was at that point that things in my life, like my addiction, just took off. Like that feeling, this euphoric feeling of warmth, happiness. We'll just put that as happiness. And then I literally felt nothing, no emotion, no pain, no nothing, physically, emotionally. And I wanted more. I didn't know how to get more. So I kind of went back to drinking. So I was kind of partying again after that whole incident with the school. It affected a lot of work. It affected a lot. Like I lost a lot of jobs. As soon as I had a consistent supply for painkillers, I was constantly getting them over and over and over. I was buying them. Towards the end of my addiction, I was probably spending $200 to $300 a day just on opiates. And it was my life. I did anything and everything I could to maintain, just to feel good and feel normal, so I didn't have to withdraw and stuff like that. So, the dopamine rush that you have to get, right? That once you go off of it, your dopamine goes down, and then you got to get that back up, and so you've got to get that supply. And going back into that story of the accident, that is such a common thing with drug addiction, starting with the prescription drugs, and the pain pills are so common, right, with addiction. And I don't think people know the epidemic as much. And there's been Netflix movies about it, right? There's been documentaries about it, but our doctors are still handing out pills like candy. Yeah. And it's causing so many problems with that. Do you see that a lot in your patients too, that's just kind of a starting point for a lot of them? Or maybe is it something of a relapse for some people when it comes to the painkillers? Yeah, I could see. Definitely leads into it. I think it's probably, well, if you know the right people, then heroin is a lot easier to come by. But painkillers is something that you just become dependent on them, is what it is. Right? And you're right. Like going back, that was around. I can't remember the name of the documentary on Netflix, but that was around the time when they're just handing out, and doctors were being like giving kickbacks for prescribing like OxyContin and all that stuff. So you're right; they were handing out like candy. So, and a lot of the times it's, for me personally, like it started off with Percocet tins, Lortab tins. And I told myself I would never, like, I'll never do OxyContin. You know, OxyContin's for drug addicts, kind of minimizing my own addiction. And then come to find out there were no Lortabs or anything like that. And lo and behold, there's an Oxy 80. So I'd never done one before. And so I ended up cutting that into quarters and did that first one, and I didn't snort. I wasn't snorting or anything like that, like at that point, but ended up rocking my world, and I loved it. Like I loved it, and I was hooked, and I kept trying to find oxys over and over and over, and lo and behold, like there's no oxys, and I told myself, you know, I'll never try heroin. Heroin's for junkies. No oxys, and there it was right in front of me with some heroin. So I ended up going. It's just this progressive thing that gets worse and worse. And you know, I look back, and so many times that I didn't hold boundaries that I had set for myself, and not just that, but like went against my own core values and beliefs. And I think that kind of really kept me in my own cycle of my addiction too.
How often do you see that in your therapy where someone sets those boundaries like what you set, and then because of the addiction and because of the need to get that fix, it takes them beyond those moral compasses that they've already tried to stay with?
Yeah, no, I see it a lot. I mean, going through withdrawals from opiates is not a very enjoyable thing. Depending on how you're administering it, depending on how much you're using, like it could just be like a light flu to something where you're throwing up, and it's just not enjoyable at all. Right. So if I'm going through withdrawals from like OxyContin or something like that, I don't care what I'm going to take as long as I don't have to feel that way. Right. And so that's like the maintaining part that I was talking about. Like I was doing $200 to $300 a day just to maintain, just to feel normal.
Wow. Yeah, that's that's a ton to do, right? That's hard to do. You know, it is crazy that people have to get progressed to that point. And you know, like going back to what you said, heroin and opiates are some of the hardest ones to go through. From friends' experiences, and tell me if I'm wrong, when someone goes into a rehab for opiate addiction, don't they have to be monitored a lot more heavily than some other drugs that people go in for?
Yeah, I think it depends on the severity of like how much they're using and how they are using it. Like IV, your withdrawals are gonna be a lot harder than if you're snorting it or just eating it. So yeah, like dehydration, all that stuff. Once you get into like alcohol and benzos and the detoxing from that, it becomes a lot more. What's the word I'm looking for? You need to monitor a lot more because of the risk of seizures. So there's a lot more death that can happen when withdrawing from those ones, but you still need to be monitored for sure for the opiates.
Yeah, a friend of mine actually, one of my best friends from junior high, he did pass away. I think it was back in 2013, where he went in for opiate addiction, but he didn't tell him he was on alcohol and benzos, like what you just said. They didn't even know. Yeah. And they actually found him dead a couple of days later because they weren't able to monitor him for it properly. And it can be very dangerous like that. His brother actually went through rehab also, and he's going to be on our podcast in the future. Nice. He's come and spoken at our school, and he has a great story also. Wow. So I want to kind of go back to, it's a quote that you sent me before that you've done a podcast, or not a podcast, but you've done a TikTok on. You said, "I didn't even know I was addicted. I thought I was just having a fun and good time." Where did the sudden realization that, hey, I'm an addict or there's something wrong, I need to change something? What was that point for you?
Yeah, it was pretty interesting, like how naive I was to addiction. I still remember this vividly, is that I wasn't super heavy into. This is probably like the beginning of the worst, about 2006 ish, I think, 2005, 2006, something like that. I was doing what's called Roxy's, and they're Percocet with no acetaminophen, Tylenol in it, and I would sit there and I wouldn't take any for a few days, and I would just have these hot and cold chills. Body aches and stuff like that, like typical withdrawal. And I didn't know what was going on. And I can't remember if I was talking to an old associate or something like that. And they were like, dude, you're going through withdrawals. And I was like, what? Like, well, I don't even know what that is. So I actually did research on it, and it talked to me. I was like, holy crap. Like I'm addicted to these things, like beyond, because of how I was taking them and abusing them. And obviously I wasn't prescribed them. Like, this is beyond a dependency. Like, I'm addicted to this. So I actually sat my family down and I was like, hey, I'm like, I've got a problem with this. I don't know what's going on. Like, and kind of, I'll get into this in a minute, but I ended up moving from Utah to Arizona again. And I kind of bounced back and forth there for about 5 years to get away from that. And I did fine. You know, I still drank a little bit while I was down there, but I came back, and within 2 weeks I was right back at it. So it was that point that I realized, like, hey, this is a problem. Like, I'm spending money on this. I'm not, like, yeah, it was just insane to see how naive I was to what addiction was. Because in your mind, like, you have this stereotype of like what an addict looks like, right? Like a homeless person sitting on the street or something like that. And I was nothing like that. So it's just pretty crazy to think about, like, going back to that.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of people always think, almost every single person who's come and talked to our school, right? We have a lot of people who come and talk to our students about their experiences. Not any single one of them says, I knew I was an addict or I planned to be an addict, right? It's something that happened because of the choices that I made before. And it wasn't, hey, I took drugs once and now I'm an addict. It was something over time, just like what you were saying, something over time that hit, and it took them a long time to realize. And sometimes it's an outside factor that is what made them realize. And sometimes it was themselves saying, wow, I need to change. And so you being able to realize that, that's a big step right there, and being able to see that in yourself for sure. So where was the time that you actually were able to seek help, and like how did your family support you? Kind of go through that process of what happened when you decided, hey, I need treatment, I need help.
Yeah, it was let's see, probably about 2000, and so I ended up moving down to Salt Lake to live with one of my brothers. And the first time I actually sought treatment, sought help, and went to my family was, I think, in 2011. And my brother was actually in treatment at the time too, at the same place. And I ended up going there. It was an awesome place. It was in Taylorsville, but I wasn't ready. It was an outpatient program. I think I was doing IOP, not PHP at the time. For people who don't know that, PHP is you do 20 to 24 hours a week in treatment. IOP is like 90 hours a week in treatment.
Okay.
I don't think I had insurance at the time or anything like that. And my sister and the rest of, like, family members stepped up and actually paid for treatment. And I really took advantage of that. So I didn't even complete that. In fact, I ended up moving back up to Cache Valley in 2012. And that's when everything kind of, in reality, this shit hit the fan. That was my rock bottom, was that. And it was, I don't want to say it was pretty bad, because comparatively to other people, it's like, my story is not even that bad, but like for me, it's what I needed. My family was actually like able to set some really strong boundaries and do things that were uncomfortable for them to kind of help me out with that. But yeah.
Is that kind of like, have you seen the show Intervention?
Yeah.
Right? It was a kind of like Intervention. They had to set boundaries, and they had to kind of say, hey, if you don't follow this is the consequences of it. Is that, did you ever go through an intervention, or was it just kind of them just saying, hey, we're done. We just want like, our dad back. We want our husband back. We want this. Here's what's going to happen if you don't stop. Or how did that happen?
Yeah, no, it wasn't, I wouldn't say like an intervention. I think if anything was an intervention, it was me coming to them saying I had a problem. But there were times where they would try to talk to me and I would completely deflect and go somewhere else. And I just wouldn't have it because I didn't want them. I didn't want to talk about it. I just wanted to do what I wanted to do, even though they knew what I was doing and I denied it all the time. But there was, first of all, interventions, depending on how they go, they don't work. In fact, that show has a 10% success rate or something like that. And because you don't set ultimatums with people struggling with addiction, like that is not the approach to take. In fact, it's the opposite of what you want to do. So,
interesting. No. Yeah, I've never thought about that.
Yeah, no, there's a guy named Johan Hari, who is the nephew of Bruce Alexander, who did the research study or whatever you want to call it on Rat Park back in the 70s. And he does a TED Talk. Johan Hari does his TED Talk. And at the very end, he said, that's not what we want to do. In fact, we want to sit down with them and show them that we love them while holding boundaries. And he said, the opposite of addiction is connection. So when we cut people off, we end up making it worse because, well, either we're not worth it or whatever it is. Like it's pretty negative. But
also has the opposite effect of that. Okay.
Yeah, we want the connections. So,
that's interesting.
The whole thing with them, I came back up here. I got in a relationship that I should not have gotten in. That was probably part of an addiction to itself. Like it was probably one of the worst decisions I ever made, but it also got me to where I'm at too. So I can't really sit and complain about that, but yeah.
A negative that turned into a positive, right?
For sure. I was using opiates. I was using a lot of heroin at the time, or any kind of opiate I could get my hands on. Move up here, get in this relationship. I was still using. She was clean at the time, or as far as I know, she was clean at the time. And I would like let her in a little bit and told her, hey, I had a little relapse. And in reality, I was using the whole time. And her addict brain is like, oh, well, if you got to relapse, I get to relapse too. I'm like, okay, what do we got to do? So I ended up cross addicting to meth because that was her drug of choice. And that was the downfall. Cause the minute I started consistently using meth, like, oh man, like it was over. And the minute I started using it like intravenously, that was like a whole new ball game. And, I ended up catching 3 felonies in 3 months in 2012. Yeah. I ended up July 5th, 2012. Someone called me in for a DUI, which to this day, like I was not drunk. I had used earlier that morning. It was 12 hours later. Like honestly, like a cigarette, I was smoking and a cigarette fell in my lap and I like reacted out of it and picked it up and they called me in. But again, like God works in mysterious ways. I needed that to happen, but got a 3rd-degree felony, 2 Class A misdemeanors. I got a possession, a DUI, and paraphernalia. 12 days later, I got another possession and DUI because I wrapped my car around a tree. Wow. I was under the influence on. And then
you survived on that one.
Yeah. It was luckily like the first accident I got in, I wasn't wearing my seatbelt. I took my seatbelt off a minute before it happened. This one, I was wearing my seatbelt. And luckily, like, because I was passed out, I think it didn't do it could have been a lot worse because my body was limp and I didn't have to worry about tensing up or anything. But yeah, that happened both of those happened in July, and then September I picked up another. This is where my family intervened. Picked up another possession and paraphernalia, but it was because my brothers got together and called the cops on me, called my probation officer because I was still using. That's where it kind of like the ripple effect and how much it affected my family and how oblivious I was to like how it was affecting my family, or either I was so selfish that I just didn't care. My 5-year-old nephew at the time ended up finding my little stash of paraphernalia and my needles, spoons, and my meth in it too. And
Wow.
they were living, my brother and his kids were living with me and my mom at the time. And that's when they got together and like, hey, we got to do something about this. So yeah, they did the hardest decision that they had to do and call the cops. I ended up bailing out that night, but it was just kind of a ripple effect from that point forward. Because I ended up having a warrant. My brother took me to court, and the cops ended up arresting me right outside of court for that warrant. And I sat in jail for the next 2 months, just waiting and waiting to try to get out of jail. But yeah, they ended up finally letting me out on a pretrial release. And in February of 2013, I ended up signing on to the First District Drug Court up here. It was kind of a blessing in disguise. So.
Definitely. We had another speaker who came and talked to our kids while he was in rehab, and his name was Hector. Same story. His girlfriend, who he was living with at the time, was the one who called him in and had him arrested because of his drug use, because she was sick of it. Yeah. She just had found out that she was pregnant also.
Good for her.
And so she wanted a better life. Yeah, she wanted a better life for her.
It's not easy to hold boundaries. It really isn't. Like,
it's not.
Yeah.
And when he came and talked to our kids, and he's going to come on the podcast again at a later date. He's nice. Actually down here in Springville near me, and he told the kids that was the best thing that ever could have happened to me, even though I was mad at the moment. She saved my life, right? And as far as I can tell, with all of his posts and everything, he's doing awesome right now. He just got a new job. He's been making his life better. It's been really good. But when kids were asking him questions, they actually asked her a question because she was at the assembly, and she just said, I didn't know what I was thinking. I just had to do it. And so I'm thinking your family was probably in that same situation, right? Where they're like, hey, something's got to give, especially when your nephew's the one who's finding your drugs and your paraphernalia. So when did you actually start going into rehab and going through that whole healing process?
Okay. Yeah. So, I guess into residential was a little bit after I signed on to drug court. So for those who aren't familiar with drug court, it's a court process. They work together with, up here, it's Bear River Substance Abuse, which is an outpatient program. And if you complete successfully, then what they'll do is most of the time they'll dismiss your charges, or depending on the severity of the charges, they'll reduce the charges. So I was doing treatment at Bear River in the throughout the whole thing. But the way this is set up here is that there's 5 phases, at least. I don't know what it's changed now because it's been almost 12 years, but they have 5 phases. The first phase you can get through in 30 days. And It took me 13 months to get through that phase. So my cycle, and this is part of what led me into the residential, was that I went to jail for 8 days the first time, right when I signed on, because I was open and honest with my judge about everything. Like, for the most part, there was a few things that I didn't tell him, and hopefully he doesn't watch this because
it's been years, right?
He can really hold myself accountable. Yeah. But yeah, I 8 days, got out 2 weeks later, was high, went back to jail for a period of time, got out 2 weeks later. So my cycle was 2 weeks later. That was what my pattern was every 2 weeks I'd get out of jail and I'd go back. And so it took me a while to get through this. I got, and I think in July. Yeah. So July 29th, 2013 is my clean date. So next month I will have 12 years clean.
Oh, congratulations, man. That is awesome. That's a huge feat.
Yeah, no, it's been a ride, but it's been awesome. So on the 29th, my color got called for a drug test, and I really sat and I started to think and evaluate. I'm like, why the hell do I keep doing this? Like, this isn't even fun. Like, I keep trying to beat the system. I keep losing. Like, I'm hurting my family. Like, I'm just tired. So I went into my counselor and I told him straight up, I'm like, hey, I'm going to be dirty. I'm tired of doing this. And so that next court date, they arrested me and I sat in jail for 3 weeks. And that was where my first experience with rehab came in. And God works in mysterious ways on this. It's crazy.
Definitely.
They sent me to First Step House in Salt Lake. So I was in jail for 3 weeks, went there. After 7 days, there's a 7-day blackout period there. So I couldn't talk to anybody, couldn't have my phone, or no, I couldn't have my phone. And the 7th day they came to me and said, hey, you had a positive test for opiates. I'm like, what? Like, you're crazy. Like, I haven't gone anywhere. I haven't done anything. Like, and they flat out told me, like, listen, if you can figure out a way to explain like how this happened, then, you know, we can help you out. If not, then there's nothing we can do to help you. And I'm like, what? Like, what does that mean? Like, if I don't admit to this, you're going to kick me out. And they're like, if you don't admit to it, then there's nothing we can do to help you. And I'm like, what? Like, I don't know what's going on here. So this is like a very spiritual experience that happened for me, and kind of a pivotal point in my recovery is like where honesty comes in. Honesty and integrity is like, I went back and I said a prayer, and I asked God, I was like, hey, what do I do? Like, do I lie? Like, I need this help. Do I lie so I can get the help that I need? Or do I tell the truth and start this recovery process like with honesty? And immediately I got this answer back that said, tell the truth. So I went back to him and said, hey, I didn't do it. Like, you can give me a hair follicle test, whatever it is. Like, I didn't do it. I don't know how that test is positive. They're like, okay. And the next day, on the 8th day, my PO showed up and arrested me and took me back to jail. And luckily I had a pretty good relationship with my PO, and all my charges were for meth. So when he asked me what happened, I was like, they told me I had a dirty you away for opiates. And he looked at me with this confused look, like, what? Like, that's not right. And I said, I know. So took me back to jail, went in front of my drug court judge, and I told him straight up, I said, I didn't do it. Like, you can hair follicle test me. Like, I did not do this. And at that point, like, there were multiple times that he should have sent me to prison, and he didn't. Mm-hmm. I had a chance to talk to him a couple months ago outside of the courtroom and stuff, and it was a pretty humbling experience for sure. But he showed me mercy, and he showed me love, and I sat in jail for another 7 weeks and got sent to Odyssey House in Salt Lake, and that was everything that I needed. I needed structure, I needed difficulty, and that's everything that Odyssey House was. Oh man, my battery. So let's
go ahead and plug in if you need to.
I am plugged in right now, so it's I might need to like actually plug in and not to my wife's computer. But
okay.
I ended up. So my dad passed away October 28th, 1994, and I would always find myself high on or around that day. That's where all the trauma started. And had I stayed in First Step House, I think they would have released me around October 10th. But because I got kicked out and I got sent to Odyssey House, it forced me to sit there and face the trauma where everything started. I was in a therapeutic community. My therapist, my group gave me time to like separate and actually process the emotions. And I just laid in my bunk and cried for about 3 hours. And then after that, I was able to go, and I had a bunch of people around me just love and support me. And from that point forward, like, I had one sanction in drug court, and I was able to just sail through it. So I ended up graduating 3 months before they would have expirated me and kicked me out. So it was definitely a journey. It was a good ride.
That is a journey. And Odyssey House is a big one here in Utah. We've had a few people go through, and I've never heard a bad thing about that house. But they do have a teen center too. They work with teens too, and so we have a lot of teens who've gone through the drug rehab program that goes to my school. They've gone to Odyssey House, and they absolutely love it. So I'm so glad it was successful for you that you were able to get through that. So now let's take the 180. You've gone through rehab, and we don't have a lot of time, but tell us about what got you into therapy, and then kind of tell us, like, when someone comes to you, what would a session look like when they first meet with you?
Yeah. So what got me into therapy was being on drug court. What they do is they require you to go to a couple of 12-step meetings a week. So okay. I found my home in Narcotics Anonymous, there were a bunch of loud, crazy people that just welcomed you with open arms, and I needed that. Like, I really needed that connection. And so I dove into service. In the beginning, I was doing like probably 4 or 5 meetings a week. And I really started to value the service part of things. And I was like, you know what? Like, my dad was a sociology professor in Oklahoma. My mom was a social worker. She helped single mothers with ORS. And so that was something that my parents really instilled to my siblings and I as service. So I was like, you know what? Why the hell don't I get paid for this? It's like, what can I do? What can I do to get paid for this? So I started looking into things. I originally went into sociology, and go figure, the director of Bear River, for drug court, overheard me talking one day about me being in school. And he's like, hey, you should probably look into switching to social work. And I was like, what? Why? And so he explained it. Like, once you get through, I was older. I was 30. I got clean, and I think 32-ish when I started going back to school. And he's like, if you do your undergrad in social work, then your bachelor's or your master's degree will be a year if you get approved for the advanced standing program. So I was like, okay, like, I'm on board with that. And that made a huge difference. The faculty up at Utah State, I still love and care about them today. Still talk to a lot of them too. And yeah, that's kind of what led me into that. My first sessions, depends on if it's a consultation or if there's just like a full session. The consultation is basically, it's 20 to 30 minutes. It's free. And just kind of getting to know them, letting them know me a little bit, and then just trying to challenge some of the thoughts that are going on in their mind, like what they're struggling with, basically just to give them an idea of like what sessions will be like with me. But in the beginning, I don't like to mess around. Like, they're there for a reason. If they're hurting, if they're whatever, like, I dive right in. Like, my relationship that I build with them is through that. Like, I'm a firm believer that you're going to get out what you put in. So I'm putting in 100% to them. I'm hoping that they put in 100% too, so we can just get things going.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, you get out what you put in. Definitely. Something I think that at all aspects of life, right? That applies to not just one thing here or there, but anything that we want to do. We just, if you don't put in what you want to get out, it's struggle. It's hard to get the results that you want if that's the case. Well, Kyle, thank you so much, man. If people have any questions or anything, you are Therapist Kyle on TikTok.
Yep.
And you have a lot of videos on there. So go follow Kyle if you guys see that. One thing that we like to do at the end of the segments is we want to talk about some things on social media that you see that you would like to debunk. And one of the things that I see on there that I do not like is when people say, once you're an addict, you're always an addict. Now, there is some truth to that, right? You always have that addiction. Yeah. But I think it's a negative connotation, because what that does is it puts a negative light on someone who's gone through that struggle.
Yep.
And I've changed it with a lot of the kids that come to my school. I say, once an addict, always a survivor. And we've told that to them to kind of change that mindset of, hey, just because you went through something doesn't mean that defines you for the rest of your life, right? And that's something I see on social media a lot, where a lot of people say, oh, once an addict, always an addict. And I want to debunk that and say, once an addict, always a survivor. Yeah. What is something on social media that you see that people post a lot of that just irks you as a therapist?
I would say there's two things, kind of just building on what you're saying is that to break this stigma, we have to stop talking about ourselves like we're addicts, right? Like, I'm in recovery, I'm in long-term recovery. And in fact, in the 12 steps programs, they say that we do recover. Okay. So if we recover, we need to start saying that we're in recovery rather than saying I'm an addict. I don't get away from that. Right. And once an addict, always an addict. Sure, there's addictive type behaviors that might have been passed down, but
right,
we're not addicted to those things. And another thing would be, what was the other one I was going to say? I can't remember. I should have
All
started
good.
that one. Yeah. Oh,
All
man.
good.
My
You know, it'll come back. Do
Yeah.
a TikTok post on it once it
Yeah.
comes back. Say, hey, this is what I forgot to say on this podcast.
Oh, now I remember. Yeah, it's the disease,
Okay.
thing, right? Like it's people saying like, "Oh, why don't you just quit?" Like it's not that easy to just quit. It chemically changes the structure of our brain, right? It's not a moral deficiency. It is a disease. It's a disease, and I like to relate it to like people are going to probably give some controversy about this. I don't really care. I like to relate it to cancer, right? So with
Okay.
like our body, like it changes, and the less that we take care of that and the less we're on top of it. So you think of like being in remission, right? I have to do X, Y, and Z to stay on top of that. Well, in my recovery, I also have to do X, Y, and Z, like service. I have to make sure that I'm staying in the present. I'm not living in the past as much. Like I'm not doing this back and forth types. Like I have to stay here right now. And I also have to make sure that I'm applying the principles and living my core values and beliefs. And that's what keeps me in remission, right? That's what keeps me recovered. So it's not this moral deficiency. It's, yes, it is a choice that first time we take it, but once we take it that first time, like it chemically changes us. It just alters who we are.
Absolutely. You know, there's such a difference in the kids when they come to our school, right? They enter their rehab program, and between the time that they come in and the time they leave. And I mean, it's only a 3-month minimum program, which isn't a lot of time, right? Especially for a teenager. But the difference in how they think, how they respond, how they act, how they talk, their whole demeanor and how they carry themselves are totally different from the time on. And a lot of kids admit to me like, oh yeah, I don't even want to go do drugs again. I feel so much cleaner. I feel so much more on my feet. Like I feel like I have control in myself again. And you do that, see that difference. And I hear that from a lot of people, especially here in Utah, right? Like, why do you do that? Why don't you just quit? Like exactly what you said. And it is something that people struggle with. It's not, and you don't see people like thinking clearly, right? It's not a what am I doing in their mind, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's how do I get my next fix? How do I feel normal again? How do I get out of this rut that I'm in, right? And all those things are going through their minds instead of just, oh, what am I doing to hurt other people, right? What am I doing to hurt myself? It's a total mind shift. Oh, I think Kyle's computer just died on us. So, but I just want to say thank you, Kyle, so much again for coming in. Appreciate your story. It's awesome. Again, if you want to go follow Kyle on TikTok, he is Therapist Kyle, and he's also just Kyle Hickman on Facebook. So check him out. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next time.